Thanks, Anisha.
You're welcome. And we're live, Kim.
Okay, great. I wonder if we should give it one more minute, see if some more folks join in before we start, Wayne, if that's okay with you.
That's fine.
Great. And then some of us get busy, right? Take a phone call right before a webinar starts and you're wrapping it up. Give it one more minute. All right, let's go ahead and get started because I know we have a great presentation today, and he's going to be the full hour because we always have great Q&A afterward. Thank you, Wayne, for that. Once again, LIC is happy to have Wayne Whitzell with us again with DFS Green. Wayne is the Executive VP of Corporate Services, also a member of the IFMA, the Corporate Facilities Council board member, and also we are fortunate what DFS Green and Wayne is a sponsor of the LIC. So we are happy to have him join us today. Great presentation about the FM, the challenges that we as the FMs may have every day in our jobs. And he's got some great outtakes and some good learning outcomes from this that we are going to be able to join. So without further ado, Wayne, thank you again. Excited to have you. I know everyone's busy. It's here at the end, wrapping up school years and getting ready to start summer. I know everyone's excited to hear this, and I think this, I'm expecting this is going to give us some re-energizing for the summer.
Yes, yes, there's always a little sweet and sour with the stuff I do. So there's a little, let's break it down and then build it up situation. But thank you so much, Kim, and thanks to you and Phyllis and the rest of the leadership team. You guys are doing a great job running the council and doing some new innovative things. So I really appreciate that as a member of the council. I'm also getting a little bit of feedback, maybe Kim, that might be from you if you want to mute here.
I will move that. And let me remind everybody that we are recording the conversation, the presentation from Wayne. We'll also get the slides and share those on our social media on YouTube and link that to Wayne. So everyone can grab that any accessible way possible. So I will go ahead and mute so you don't have that feedback.
Thanks, Kim. So this presentation, I love this one. This is a fun one for me because I get to really let you guys know as practicing FMs that I feel your pain. They say I really, most of my best friends are FMs, so I'm intimately aware of the challenges you guys face. And I think one of the things that a lot of vendors and associate members miss out on is they don't spend a lot of time at World Workplace in the classes with you. They're busy working the expo floor or doing things like that. But the real benefit of things like World Workplace is being able to sit among FMs and hear what they're hearing and put your finger on the same pulse they are and really understand some of those challenges. So this really is a presentation about the challenges that FMs face and kind of how some of those things are wounds are self-inflicted in a lot of ways by FMs. But what I want to do is I want to talk about possibly a new way to approach facilities management in a more strategic way. And I want to start with my favorite quote, and you guys should probably like this here. This is a red meat for the FM base here, but this is actually by Kurt Vonnegut. Another flaw in the human character is that everybody wants to build and nobody wants to do maintenance. I mean, that's it, right? It's you know, the architecture and design communities want to develop this real sexy, you know, facility, this new building, this beautiful thing, and then they, you know, it's up to you to maintain it. And that's kind of the big thing that you know, you always hear a lot of FMs talk about. It's a thread that runs through everything. And I think a really good story that exemplifies this is something that happened to me at an IFMA meeting many years ago. This is when LEED first kind of hit. I mean, probably around 2000. Actually, it was a little later than that. It was probably 2012 when I was at this meeting. It was actually IFMA, a Northern California IFMA chapter. I won't say which one. But many of you might not know what a charrette or charade charrette is. But when in LEED, when you're designing your building and you're planning for a LEED certified building, the goal is to get all of your stakeholders together in a room and have a meeting about the building and the build and everything to get everyone's input and have everyone on the same page, so to speak. So we had this person, this consultant, come in and she was speaking to us about LEED and about the LEED charrette process. And she was going over, she said, we had a really good charrette. We had everybody there. We had the GC, we had the architect, we had the designers there, you know, and she listed all these people. And then I'm looking around and I'm like, I looked to the guy next to me, he was actually the president at the time. I said, do you want me to say it or do you want to say it? And he says, no, go ahead, because he knew exactly what I was going to do. And I raised my hand. I said, you had all the stakeholders there? She goes, absolutely. It was very successful. I said, why didn't you have an FM at the table? And she said, why would we need a facilities manager at the design build charrette? Right, there you go, boom. And you and I and all the FMs are thinking, because we can predict what's going to happen in the future if you locate that outlet there, or if you put that pump 6 inches next to the wall, it means an extra 30 hours in wrench time per year for me to maintain that thing, and I can't get to it in an emergency. Or you want to put, you know, an atrium that's 75 feet high with glass over soft limestone flooring, and you're going to expect me to clean that glass. Maybe you might want to reconsider some of this, right? So that's the idea. So I think charrette sounds like charade, right? I mean, a charrette, I'll read you the definition here of a charrette. It's a meeting in which all stakeholders in a project attempt to resolve conflicts and map solutions. Conversely, a charade is an absurd pretense intended to create a pleasant or respectable appearance. And I think that's what a lot of eco charrettes or sustainability charrettes really are when they don't have facilities management involved in that discussion. And this was further emphasized many years ago, probably around 2009-ish, somewhere in there. My mentor, Kit Tuvison, who was an IFMA fellow who passed away a few years ago, he and I taught a class to the Northern California chapter of USGBC on LEED EB at the time, existing buildings. And we started going through the presentation, and then I casually mentioned, so when you recertify your buildings, and their hands went up, and what do you mean recertify? Well, you know, every 5 years you have to collect this data, and you know, you'd be collecting it along the way. You package it and you put it back in. And they said, we didn't know you had to do that. The mentality in the architecture and design community is that you build it LEED and it's going to be LEED forever. That there's no, you know, oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be maintained. We built this, you know, monolithic thing to the gods, and it's perfect and sustainable. It's not the way it works, as we all know. But that was the mentality. That's primarily because LEED was really, the core of LEED is an A&D community. There's obviously EB component of that, but it's still not the major culture within LEED. It's still a build-oriented organization. That's changed. It's gotten better over the years, but it's not IFMA, right? But I want to kind of do a lighthearted, funny look at this, because after thinking about this and being friends with so many FMs, I kind of came up with this this analogy here. And it's like, you know, here you've got this really chasm that divides our two communities. You have operations and maintenance over here, and you have architecture and design over here. And and here's our courageous facility manager, and she's completely on the other side of the chasm that divides these two things. And there's a big difference between these two sides. And you look at the A&D community, they're very first cost focused. It's very transactional. When the building's done, it's done. It's with those CapEx dollars that flow like milk and honey. They get to be creative and create these sexy spaces, and it's all new and has a new building smell. And they really only have to deal with this thing for a few years, during the design build, and then it's over. But on the other side of the coin, it's very, very different. We're looking at total cost focus. We're looking at it's a relationship. I've got to get involved with my internal clients, with management, with it's people, and I got to deal with people, and not code. It's OpEx dollars, which hey, this little thing riding on your budget is going to get scrutinized like crazy compared to the crazy amount of money they built this thing with. And you could be creative, but be creative with your budgets. And you can see it's definitely different. You're talking about something that's aging, and you're going to have it for decades. And have the thing. And the way I kind of look at this is the A&D community is like that honeymoon phase. That's where everything's a party. Everything's great. We just got married, and it's beautiful, and everything's fine. But on the O&M side, to me, it's like it's decidedly different. It's like instead of the newlywed phase, it would be if you're just got married and you're in a one-bedroom apartment with a baby in diapers that just pooped up the back of her diaper with a dog too, and you're kind of cramped. That's the O&M life compared to the newlywed life. And of course, it's a completely different mentality over there, because they're not concerned with the same things that we're concerned about. So it's we have to deal with the problems. We have to deal with the storms of life in our facility. What was supposed to change all of this was sustainability. Sustainability was really supposed to close that loop, that cradle to cradle terminology, where we were supposed to get budget dollars to come in, and we would provide input out to the organization and kind of create this flow to say, okay, let's really be sustainable and maximize useful asset life, environmental impact, and so forth. But that didn't really ever happen, at least to the degree. I mean, you guys remember back in when sustainability first started to hit, the FMs were getting these sustainability directors placed over them. These people from the outside that were telling you how to run your facilities. And a lot of them had very little idea about facilities management. They were coming from that design build mentality, or they're coming from an environmentalist aspect, but not from running a facility. And I know that shaped a lot of FMs back then, but part of that was the FM's fault. We'll get into that in a little bit here. But really, what happens is that A&D really builds things largely without our input. And they build this thing, and then they throw it over to us and say, okay, guys, here you go, maintain it. We're done. We got our pictures in our portfolio. We're going to go do another one. And they kick rocks, and they head down the road, and they leave you there. And it's usually just about that time when the vultures show up on your side of the chasm to deal with more problems. But this is it. This is the life of the FM in most cases. It's like they built it. They didn't ask you anything about it. They didn't say, what do you guys think about this? What do you think about putting white carpet in the freight corridor? They didn't ask you any of that stuff. And now it's your responsibility. So I hear FMs constantly complain about this, and rightfully so. A lot of them don't get a seat at that table. Some do, but a lot of them don't. But really, it's just about this point too, where sometimes the FM, she looks across the chasm and she sees, wait a minute, is somebody building a bridge to come help me? Are they trying to reach out? What is this? I see something, somebody's trying to come out, and then they look and like, oh no, it's just sourcing and procurement. And for a lot of FMs, sourcing can be a source of more problems when they're not aligned. There are some really good sourcing folks out there. I've met a few. They're not the norm. And that's not a slight on them as people or their careers or whatever. It's just the organizations sometimes don't align sourcing with the FM, And what ends up happening is, the FM is out there saying, hey, help, I need help with this. Can, this thing, I need a vendor for this, or I need a solution for this, and I need to procure this service or this product. And most sourcing is like, well, they're interested in checking boxes. They're interested in making sure all the compliance boxes are checked, this or checked. And there's been cases where I have been dealing with an FM on, say, leading up to an RFP or something like that, and the FM and I are like, we're grooving, we're talking together, we really understand it. She understands what I'm saying, and then it gets cast over the fence to procurement, and procurement mangles it. And instead, they send something out, and I'm like, they're not going to be procuring what this FM wants. And again, there's not that connection. And again, it's not all sourcing's fault. It's in some cases the way the system is built in the organization that it doesn't allow for that more integration between those two things. Things get kind of cast over a fence, and then it goes into the sourcing engine, and as opposed to it being a hand-in-hand thing the entire process. Now, again, I've seen great exceptions to that rule, but they're definitely not the norm in my experience. So if you've got a good sourcing person, take them out to lunch. But this is really what happens is they'll procure something oftentimes that goes into your world, and it's like dropping a tornado in the middle of your already bad world. You were expecting this kind of vendor that would do A, B, and C, and they went and procured the lowest price, technically acceptable, TALP, technically acceptable, lowest price vendor. And now they're creating more problems for you, because now you're having to babysit the vendor constantly to get them to do what they're supposed to do in their contract, and you become a contract administrator because that's what was procured, instead of you saying, no, I've been down that road, it actually costs more. So sometimes the FM, they get fed up and they say, okay, well, we've got to do something about this. We've got to go talk to some of these people. We got to talk to these A&D folks, or these people outside our purview. So bright-eyed and full of promise. The FM, she takes her team and she says, we're going to go talk to those A&D people about this new building that we're going to build, or we're going to even possibly meet those mythical C-suite creatures and talk to them about what FM is, and let them know we're not just a cost center. and they get in the boat and they decide we're going to make the trip over there. But pretty soon, the FM finds that there are a little, there's some rough waters out there. This isn't an area where we're used to being. And the closer and closer they get to those architecture and design people, the worse it gets. And eventually, they find they're out of their depths, and their expedition goes awry, and they end up dumping all their coordinators into the water. And basically go back to your, with your tail between your legs to the O&M side of the fence, disappointed and bruised. Because you realize at some point many FMs are unprepared and ill-equipped for that journey to talk to A&D. They might not. It's easy to complain on this side after you've been given something that now is like, God, I wouldn't have done it this way. It's easy to complain. Well, what would you have done had you been over there? What could you have done? Were you involved over there? And basically, you're at this point, it's like, with no hope in sight, and managing a facility built without our input, the problems start to roll in like carpet bombs in the foreseeable future. And this is the daily existence of a lot of FMs. It's like, this building, I had no say in how it was designed and put together. I'm now having to deal with all the problems, and nobody cares. So that's kind of a funny, lighthearted look at this problem. But what do you do? Okay, what do you do? And then to take our analogy here a little further and say, you have to build bridges. It's important to try to connect with the other sides and other departments to build this network, to unisolate FM from the rest of the organization. You guys hear this constantly. It's in all these, CFM books up here about connecting with other departments. But there's a reason why that doesn't happen at the levels it should in many organizations with many facility managers, because they have their heads down dealing with problems. But those bridges have to be built in order to make that connection and deal with this problem. And this is, I will say, it's still largely on the shoulders of architecture and design to make this happen. They bear more responsibility in this to reach across there, because it's really emanating from them and they need to modify the way they do things and think of a total cost of ownership model with design, build, and sustainability instead of just very first cost and transactional. And again, sustainability was supposed to do this, but in practicality, it doesn't. And that's primarily, I believe, because of the way we do accounting. I think there's those two streams, CapEx, OpEx, where things fall. I think that has a lot to do with the way things are, but also too is people don't want to be tied to a building after they build it for 50 years and all the problems. They need to cut and move and not have any responsibility for those things later on. And I think that's a problem. I think everyone needs skin in that game. But FMs bear a lot of responsibility here too, because even if they had a seat at that table, do you know what you would say? Do you know what you would do? Do you know how you would deal with that? So that's an important way to look at that, but somebody's got to take the leap. Somebody's got to do something different for something to change. You've got to introduce a new piece on the board, on the game board, so to speak. You just can't think something different is going to happen and just complain about it. But I want to take, in terms of really what FMs do and the FM role is let me ask you a question. How do you view your FM role? If you were to analyze how you do your work, and how would you define your role? Is it like Sisyphus, constantly pushing the boulder uphill? Is it the same lurching from task to task to task each week, only to repeat it? Are you in a comfortable groove, or are you in a rut with things? Is this really what FM is? And from other people's perspective, is how do other people view you? Is this the way people see you, from the outside? And it's interesting sometimes to ask people, what do you think I do? I actually had friends several years ago that pulled me aside in all seriousness. This is really not creepy, but weird. They pulled me aside and said, we have a question. We want you to tell us, are you in like the CIA or Secret Service? So what do you mean? And it's because just the way you travel, at a moment's notice, and you go away and so forth. And it was just their perception, because that's what they thought, because of how much I would travel for business. But the thing is, looking at yourself from the outside, what is it that you're doing? What would people say you're doing? Honestly, what does it look like? And I think the thing with FMs is, people from the outside and us, we view ourselves as a clearinghouse for problems. We take this, the problem comes into the FM box, we kind of deal with it and send it on its way and fix it. And that's really what I think most FMs think that they do, or at least we tell people it's what they do. We control all these problems and fix them and move it on its way and keep that facility going. But that model has problems, and through some conversations over the years with IFMA fellows John Martins and Dr. Dean Khashoggi, some of you may recognize their names. There's been some new approaches that they've suggested for FM, and I've really taken a shine to some of these things and kind of pieced together some of the things that they said with some ideas, with some things I've talked to FMs about, and really tried to put this into a visual model that's kind of fun for everybody to really understand this process. So let's get into that model. Right now, the way things are for most facilities is that you have your clients and you, and a problem arises. And when that problem, it could be anything, hot and cold calls, whatever. But those problems are then sent up to the FMs as hot and cold calls. We're out of paper. There's a broken fixture, a cleaning request, coffee machine, restack, another hot and cold call, another hot and cold call, another hot and cold. But what does the FM do once they get that request? Well, they send it to the service provider. Hey, there's a problem with the coffee machine. Hey, there's a hot and cold call. Hey, there's this. And they send it down on their way to the service provider. Well, now what happens next? Well, the service provider says to the FM, okay, I've got this, I will take care of this, here you go, or here's the solution, here's what we should do, what do you think? Will this work? Is this okay? And now that goes up. So now things are really beginning to happen. So then what does the FM do? Well, the FM then goes to the client and says, hey, we're going to take care of this, we're going to do this, and she's managing this whole process of this kind of back and forth, and the FM is doing her job. And then what you've got is, in reality, you've got all this traffic that's going to and from the FM up and down these things, all this traffic, and the FM is in the middle at that bottleneck dealing with all of this stuff. So I want to say this is the kind of reality of things, but this is facility administration. This isn't facility management. You're administering, you're not managing. That's really what I think the trap a lot of FMs fall into is they continue in their careers bottlenecking things through themselves or through their department in a way that keeps them administering and keeps them in a very tactical mindset and activity level instead of a strategic mindset and strategic level, which is really where those A&D folks and those people are thinking in terms of more of a strategy about implementing strategy for the company and embedding that into the build of their building. So the problem with being a middleman, so to speak, is middlemen are usually the first to get automated, downsized, or outsourced out of a facility. And it's like, think of all the bookstores that are out of business now because Amazon came in and got rid of that kind of brick and mortar middleman, and now they can pass things directly to the client. So, I mean, let's talk about middlemen for a second. So I just want to give you an example here. So this is Hubert, and Hubert is the manager of the Burger Barn, and you have Susie here, and Susie ordered a burger, and she ordered it with no onions. So she got the burger, and the burger had onions on it. So she went back to Hubert and said, Hubert, I don't like this burger. It's got onions on it. You need to fix this. So Hubert then goes to the service provider. He goes to Clyde in the kitchen and says, hey, Clyde, this one was not supposed to have onions on it. So Clyde says, okay, I'll fix it. Sends a new burger back to Hubert. Hubert then gives it to Susan. Does this look familiar? It's the exact same thing we're talking about here, right? So understand this, that this is playing out before our eyes. The automation of food service, especially. Think of all the McDonald's that have replaced their cashiers with the ordering pads. If you've ever gone into a McDonald's recently, these giant ordering pads. There used to be a row of cashiers at most McDonald's. Now there's one. There's usually only one, possibly two, and everything else is through these pads. So this automation process is happening, and eventually it's just going to be that it comes out in a box or in a tray, and you don't even interact with a human being for all of that. So it's a very dangerous position to be a middleman, a middle person, however you want to say it, in a process. It's something to be careful of. But this is really the question, is our time spent optimizing this model? Okay, how can we get more efficient at processing requests from the clients and service provider? How can we make this faster? How can we save money? Because all this time and effort and tracking and things falling through the cracks in our email is all adding cost and problems for organization. So what do we do? Is this our reality? Is this what FM is, facility management, or is this facility administration? So most of you might see this and say, oh yeah, this is an optimized FM tied to my phone. Problem comes in, 15 seconds later, I'm on it, I'm dealing with it and moving it through. That's my job. Is it? Is that your job as the facility manager or director? Or could that possibly be someone else's job? And really, the way this plays out, and I'm not a very binary thinker, but Kit, my mentor Kit, used to say, look, let's just divide the world into two categories, just for this purpose here to talk about it. So he was letting you know, I know life's not black and white, but when you look at it that way, sometimes it provides some stark contrast. And really, the administrative mindset here, you guys are all familiar with this: reactive, rigid, it's control, it's very granular. We've always done it this way. It's definitely where the source of fear burn out and burn up. And it's really the administration of your department. But if you contrast that, it's pretty obvious what the differences are here. We're talking about something that communicates value and not cost. This is where we start to get innovative and think critically instead of reacting to things. It's very strategic, and it's leadership. It's not administration. It's leadership in your organization. Now, the concept here that I'm talking to you about, I just got to say this. I'm talking about something that's very aspirational here. I can't give you an exact roadmap for everything that you're going to need to do this. I'm going to give you some tips and tools, but this is really to get you to start thinking differently, just to say, hey, in the course of your day, you kind of lift your head up for a second and say, gosh, I've been administrating for 6 hours. What have I done strategically? You know, and start to think this way, that monitor yourself and say, what am I doing? You know, where is my focus? Am I leading my department, or am I just administering FM stuff? What's happening? And John has a really good quote here. We're working ourselves out of a job by working inside this box. And this is a model that will result in the extinction of FM. And there are ways where you can already start seeing that's happening, especially with the integration of technology and IoT into our world. But really, we're just painting ourselves into a corner. You can only get so much efficiency out of administration before you become a commodity, right? And then what happened to Hubert at the Burger Barn? The only way to make Hubert even more efficient is to replace him with a computer, or replace him with a robot, or replace him with technology. So if all you're doing is administrating, chances are that's something, or a lot of it, that could be done with an algorithm to a degree, right? So we need to start thinking that way. And this is where we start talking about paradigm shifts. And this is a visual representation of a paradigm shift. Some of you might be familiar with S-curves. If you're not familiar with the term S-curve, you've lived through S-curves, especially if you've done a move in your facility or a rebranding or something. But really what happens is that there's early adopters that come on at the beginning because there's resistance to change. Everybody has that. It comes up. And then as more people hop on and it becomes, okay, we're all doing it, it becomes a commodity. And then at the peak of that commodity, organizations say, how can I eke more profit out of this? How can I eke more efficiencies out of this to get more and more with this paradigm? And eventually it's diminishing returns, because there's only so much you can do with a certain type of paradigm before you've got to jump ship and hop on a new S-curve. And that's what this is usually it's a little, you know, step back in some ways. There's a new breakthrough or innovation with some problems or challenges, but then those early adopters come on and start that new S-curve. And this is really a situation we're in now. We're at that, been at that crossroads for about 5-10 years now, where the cracks are starting to show on some of this, because we're rapidly increasing our technology and IoT stuff into our facilities and organizations. We're also seeing an exit of folks who are a little bit older, who might have more rigid mindset about some of these things. You see new people coming in who all they know is technology. That's all they know is looking at their phone. So you have these people that don't necessarily interact with human beings as well as maybe some of the previous generations. So you've got this mix of things that's happening here, that something's about to burst. There's something new that's got to come from this. So in our model that we have, with all this traffic going back and forth, what can we do differently? Well, let's complete this model that John and Dr. Dean and other folks like them have spoken about in different ways. This is kind of my visual representation of some of those ideas. But the big change is you've got to replace that service provider, that vendor, with a subject matter expert. That's the key. That's the core thing that has to happen. Because why? Because what we're going to talk about doing is building a road here. Connect the clients directly with the subject matter experts. Now, I can already, hear the screams of horror from the FMs saying, "Oh, well, what am I going to do? How am I involved? What do I need to do in this process?" They can't go direct because they're going to screw it up. Well, service providers, technically acceptable low-price service providers, may certainly screw it up, but subject matter experts won't. They won't screw it up. And if they do, they've got very good error recovery systems to mitigate the problems from screwing it up without you being involved. So how do you manage this process then? If everything's not going through you, how do you manage this process? Well, a subject matter expert is going to send you KPIs and information. And guess what? They're going to know the KPIs you need to know. You don't even have to know that. Most subject matter experts will tell you, here's the things you probably should know about what we're doing. and by the way, next year, you should probably know about this. They'll have that long-term view, that innovative view. And then from the client side, you're going to get feedback from your internal clients, your satisfaction metrics. So between those two things is how you're going to manage this. Now, this new road adds value and reduces costs because you don't have all this traffic. And practically you can set this up a number of ways. And there's a lot of organizations that have their work order system direct things directly to their SMEs. The SME takes care of it, packages it back, and sends the KPI out. And as opposed to everything going through the FM. So this is something where if you don't have a subject matter expert, if you've ever found yourself in front of a vendor with contract and says, you're supposed to clean spots on the carpet, it says here, that are anywhere smaller than a dinner plate. Or if you said, well, it says the intervals, you're supposed to do this this biannual with a subcontract of bi-weekly. If you've ever had to do that with your vendor, you probably didn't hire an SME, because now you're basically an adjunct employee for that company, that vendor, being their manager and managing them and babysitting what they're doing. You don't do that with SMEs. So how do you manage your vendors? So this is something that I learned from Edward Tufte. Many of you might have heard of Edward Tufte. If not, you should look into him. He's known as the Da Vinci of data. And I think I've got all my Edward Tufte books right here that came with the class. He had this idea, and I've stolen it and used it. But he said, if you want to get a report, and he was talking about something else, but it paralleled what we're talking about with vendors, do it on an 11 by 17 piece of paper. Have all your vendors do this. Now, those of you who do quarterly business reviews, and sometimes you get those reviews back and it's a slide deck that's 100 slides, or back in the days when we did a lot of paper, a company I used to work for, the CEO would just say, look, it's got to be like a phone book. And because it was a lot of smoke and mirrors, and like, why do you want to do this? These people aren't going to read a phone book. You need to give them a summary. You do the work to summarize. So I like it because it prevents report creep. It keeps things focused. But if you have an 11 by 17 piece of paper, that gives you 4 sides to do things with. Okay, so you've got 4 things. So you say, I need every quarter, every single vendor that I have to complete this. And I like the 11 by 17 fold outs on a nice piece of paper, hand out at a meeting, because it's something tangible and it's something people can touch and go through. And I mean, certainly you can do this, on a soft copy as well. But I like the 11 by 17 hard copies as well. I think it adds something in those physical meetings, at least pre-COVID, right? But here's the way I would align this. First thing on my front cover, I would have a thematic dashboard. And this is another thing from the Table Group. I don't know if you've ever heard of Patrick Lencioni. Again, I've got the entire Lencioni canon right here. He's a Northern California business writer who writes business books that are fiction. So they're very fun and easy to read, but they're all interrelated. So the characters kind of weave their way in and out of the books, and it all takes place in Northern California, landmark places that you would recognize. But he has this concept of a thematic goal dashboard. And a thematic goal essentially says, what is the most important thing we need to be working on in the next 3, 6, 9 months, year? That anything longer than that's a long-term goal. We're not talking about a thematic goal. We're saying what's most important right now. We need to ramp up for the X, or we need to reduce costs for the Z, or what is most important, and define the 3, 4, 5 things that if you do those, that goal will happen, and dashboard them with a red, yellow, and green color. Okay, and then underneath that, you have your standard operating objectives. What are the things that always have to be done by your vendor? Response time, work order response time, client satisfaction rating. It can be wrench time. I mean, there's a number of things you could put that are always going to go. What are those defining things, those standard things that happen regardless of the thematic goal? So have that on your front page cover, and that will give you, when the vendor sends that back to you, it's a quick way to say, okay, what's yellow, green, or red? Well, let's talk about the red. You don't have to bother talking about the green because that's going well. Let's talk about the red. But what do you use the other 4 sheets, the other 3 sheets for? Well, the left inside, when you open it up, it's going to tell you what your current quarter report is. On one page, give me the KPIs, the metrics, the cost avoidance, whatever you've done that I need to know as an FM. And again, all of your vendors are doing this for you. So you kind of have this strategic, high-level view into what they're doing if they're subject matter experts. And not to say you have to be a subject matter expert to do this. Your existing vendors, if they're technically acceptable, low price, have them do this too, so you can start to understand the gaps, and maybe they can even self-identify themselves and realize, I'm a talp. I don't have this information. I don't know what this is. but at least give you the ability to quantify that. So when you open up, the right inside is the upcoming quarter reports. You got left side saying what happened last quarter, summary, what's coming up this next quarter, what do I need to know about, what projects are coming up, what security thing, what are the goals, and then the back page is your compliance and strategic stuff. As an SME, I should be able to predict the future. That's a quote from Dr. Dean Kashwagi. Subject matter experts can predict the future. I can predict the future in my industry, in the things that are happening and what you need to know as an FM. So I'll say, look, and the scuttlebutt is they're going to be putting this new law in. It's still, they're talking about it, but at the very least, you should be aware of it, FM. You're like, thank you. I now am aware of that. I won't be caught flat-footed if it happens. So you have this 4-page thing, and you get that from every vendor every quarter. That's the way you're going to be managing these folks. And it'll be very clear as the next quarter comes up, and you have this previous one with you, and you say, okay, let's talk about how all of this went. So if there's not continuity between what they're doing and they're just slapping words on a page, it's going to be pretty easy for you to ferret that out as the meeting goes on. Getting out of the administrative mindset opens up possibilities. And those possibilities for you to focus on the employee experience as opposed to the administration necessarily of your department. You can get involved in doing things with educating yourself or your teammates. Get involved in legal, real estate, and finance. If you don't understand what net present value is, go take a finance course so you can learn to speak those things, so you can be more strategic about your department. Mentor your staff. That was one of the big problems. We ended up, the silver tsunami of all these retirees. There's a term somebody different came up with called RIPs, retired in place. Where we have not passed on the legacy of FM as well as we should have to the next generation. Innovate, explore the new and different. It's surprising when you're not in a cold sweat on a treadmill every day and you get a little bit of mental freedom to be creative about a problem. You can be, and then also put the C in CFM. Is start integrating what you're doing strategically with the organization so that you're serving those C-suite goals and kind of getting a holographic seat at the C-suite table. But really, this is the division. It's strategic FM versus administrative FM. This is where the line is drawn. Everything above that line is strategic. Everything below is administrative. Do you really need to be involved in the administrative? Because if you refuse to change, if you say, okay, I have to be involved in this process and I'll manage these service providers, they're so low cost, I can have a coordinator babysit them 24/7 and I'm still ahead of the game compared to hiring a subject matter expert. Okay, all right, but guess what? If you refuse to change, there's something that is going to change for you. That is, there's some folks out there that are very good at speaking C-suite-ese. They talk routinely in this language of KPIs, efficiency, cost avoidance, enterprise-wide support. And you know who loves that kind of talk? The C-suite. and when they're approached by these outsourced companies, the C-suite says, wow, these guys know what they're talking about. They really got this down, because that's exactly what they do. They know. That's why some of these companies are so successful in what they do, because they speak that language that the C-suite wants to hear. They have this engine that comes in and does this already, and a lot of them have their preferred providers that they bring in that are established SMEs that will provide them less risk and very little problem, and it's an engine that they can turn on in a lot of cases. And the C-suite may never have even heard this from you because you've been so busy administering your facilities, or you might not know how to do this. You might not know how to talk with the C-suite and send things up the chain that would eventually get to their table up there. But if you don't do this, if you don't start thinking strategically, this is where you run the risk. You run the risk of being this FM that's kicking bricks, because another organization came in that knows how to do this well, and you're no longer relevant. That's the reality. And you guys have seen this kind of ebb and flow of the outsourced providers, maybe from like 2000-ish, where the dot boom and everything. We've opened up to outsource, then kind of rejected it and opened up, and rejected and opened up. I think people are opening up even more than ever to the outsourced model. And I think that's because of what's happening with the integration of technology, IoT, the slim pickings for employees who either A, don't want to get into FM because they think it's a janitor job, or they don't understand what it is. So we've got this kind of thing happening where I think a lot of this outsourced stuff is very attractive to organizations. But you need to be careful because, you know, if this, I mean, think about it. If the C-suite came to you right now and said, how is your department aligned with our corporate strategic initiatives? You know, this is not the look you want to give them. It's the last thing you want to do. So what can you do? Okay, what can you do? I suggest just basic things. Use that 11 by 17 thing. Definitely start doing that with your vendors. Absolutely start. You will thank me. Trust me. And I have examples of that of mine. I can show you what mine look like. I can redact the information so it's not client specific, but I can show you what I do. But you got to read outside your box. You got to start looking at other things. If you're, I mean, a great example is if you only watch MSNBC or only watch Fox News, you basically are throwing away half of the innovative possibilities that could integrate with your thinking. It's got to be this holistic thing. So read things that are outside of your comfort zone. You might not like finance, but if you really want to be talking higher level stuff, you've got to learn to talk about, you know, modified internal rate of return. You've got to understand some of these concepts. If you're going to start dealing at higher levels in the organization and asking for money, you're going to need to know the answers to some of those things. So educate yourself with this free time. And when you do talk to these other departments, you've got to understand how to talk to them. And by the way, there's tons of content in IFMA on all this stuff that I'm telling you here, like FEA, Facility Engineering Associates, Laurie Gilmer and Chris Hodges. They've got some really good content on talking to the C-suite, how to communicate cost as something other than a dollar, communicating in terms of value. But if you're talking to HR, you've got to speak soft programs. And with this time you've now freed up by being strategic instead of administrative, you can integrate more with HR and say, how can facilities support you? How can we build that net across the chasm? If you're talking to finance, you're going to speak cost. If you're talking to ops, you're going to be talking wrench time, right? But remember, in terms of cost is always relative. You never just say it costs $10. Well, it costs $10 relative to what? If we don't spend the $10, if somebody else spends the $10, there's always something around all of that. And always try to communicate the value to those things. I mean, and that can even be, hey boss, I need you know, $250,000 to replace all the piping here leading up from the street to the building. Why? How long do you think it'll last? We don't know, but it's definitely getting to that age. That's one way to do it. Another way is to send them a picture of the building 3 doors down that was built by the same builder at the same time, of their open trench sitting in the middle of their landscaping with the sewage blasting out, and then you took a picture. This is what happened to them last year. That's the way to communicate cost, right? And then, you know, don't stifle your staff's creativity. We do this so often. We bring people into organizations, we put the blinders on them. Okay, here, Timmy, you know, here's your standard issue blinders. This is the way we've always done things here, and make sure you do it too. And the restroom's down there on the left, right? I mean, that's really what it comes down to in a lot of ways, is we integrate people into our culture of administration. And I understand if you bring a coordinator on board, you know, somebody that's not, you know, FM manager or director level and so forth and above, and that's what they're hired necessarily to do, is to be more administrative in what they do, but they should still be mini strategic thinkers. They need to be coming to you with innovative ideas for doing things instead of just saying, hey boss, I caught the vendor not doing this. Is that how you want to train the next generation of FMs? To the ones that leave M&Ms on the carpet so to see if the carpet's been vacuumed? Or do you want to teach them to be strategic thinkers to solve that problem? Why isn't it not being done? How do I work with my vendor? And if the vendor can't figure that out, how do I get them out and get an SME in here that knows to vacuum properly, or whatever it could be, instead of getting them granular about looking for paper clips on the carpet, or going out and measuring with a ruler the landscaping grass, as Larry Morgan says, and says it's a 1/4 inch over where it's supposed to be according to your contract. Is that the best use of people's time? So this, I love this quote, and I'm going to tell you where I got this quote. So one of the LIC's members, Christopher Georgi, Georgie, I don't know. And back east we say Georgie probably. But anyway, he put this on one of the engaged threads where I mentioned something, or somebody mentioned something about one of my posts, and he said, bottom line, you need to become an expert at choosing experts. And I said, Christopher, can I use that quote? He says, yes, but it wasn't mine. And we can't figure out where it came from, but it sounds like a Dr. Dean quote. But this is really what it comes down to, is this is your job as an FM. You need to get good at picking experts. Now, COVID, I will tell you, COVID is a perfect example of this dynamic. As someone who is an expert in infection control and disinfection, the things I've observed this year among FMs has been everywhere from, hey, great job, to comedic, to tragic, the entire drama spectrum. There are a lot of FMs who I've been in chapter meetings, I've been in teaching, that have run with ideas that are, to an expert, we can see a lot of problems with. Some of them outright crazy, some of them, hey, you probably want to consider this, but they're running ahead with these things because they're trying to become that expert themselves on the run, on the fly. And it's a perfect example of not having subject matter expertise, of where many people overspent, many people over applied disinfectants, as an example. Many people are still, most FMs I know are still operating on old guidance from the CDC, not the new latest guidance that they're operating from. And in fact, many FMs are not even making the decisions now. It's legal saying, I don't care that the CDC says we don't have to disinfect now after 24 hours. I don't care. Go ahead and do it. Spend the money, because they're looking at it from a different bucket of liability. But the point is that if you had someone on your team that was an expert in infection control during this period as an FM, you would be getting that information. You wouldn't even have to ask them. They would call you and say, here's what you need to be thinking about right now. Boom. And give that, and from all aspects, from the liability aspect, from the risk aspect, from the workplace health aspect, from cost, all of that. But if all you had was a regular janitorial company, what happened? They went out and bought electrostatic sprayers and started spraying disinfectant around your facility and saying it's disinfected. And you didn't know any better. And most FMs I talked to over this year did not even ask me for an SDS. All this stuff is being sprayed in the facilities. So this is what I'm talking about. You need to get good at being an expert at choosing experts. How do you figure out if this is smoke and mirrors, if these people know what they're doing, and so forth? And there's, again, a lot of classes on that at IFMA too. I actually teach one called Cleaning Confidential with Larry Morgan and Richard Peterson from Impact Group. Larry's a global facilities director with SAP. I think that's recorded somewhere. I might look that up for you and see if I can give that link to the LIC to post as well. But this is the everyday reality, right? It doesn't have to be this way. Don't wait for the paradigm to shift. Don't wait to be invited to those design meetings. I mean, muscle your way in there, but get good at thinking strategically, so that when you have a seat at that table, you can predict the future about your organization, and you're now the FM expert. And underneath of you, you have a team of those subject matter experts that are feeding you information, that are supporting you in that role. And that really is the future of FM. So thank you. That's the end of my pitch. I guess we'll open it up for questions if anybody has any. I know, again, it was very aspirational, but if anybody has any questions, Anisha, is that something they could type into the chat window? I guess, let me see if I have access to chat. I do, I think. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to type them into the chat window. No? I don't know. Maybe Anisha's on another call. She's busy up there.
All righty, Wayne. Sorry about
there you
that.
are.
I'm
Okay.
here. Let's see. If anybody has any questions, type them in the chat box.
I tend not to get too many questions with this presentation. It's a little bit more, like I said, it's a little bit more aspirational. But if anybody wants any of those resources, feel free to reach out to me. It's waynew@dfsgreen.com. Patrick Lencioni is an author. You should read all of his books. and go to the Edward Tufte one-day class once COVID's gone and they start doing stuff in person. Those two things alone will get your mind right. They change mind drastically.
We just have one comment from Christopher Gigori.
Mhm.
I'm sorry if I messed that up.
Oh, being a
He just said
paisan, isn't it, Christopher?
he just said close enough on the name. Wayne, thanks. I'm pretty sure I messed it up though.
I see another one here that says, how could we learn more about getting a seat at the C-suite table and learning the lingo? So there's a couple of resources you can do at IFMA. I know Facilities Engineering Consultants has a couple of presentations around that. So I would reach out to FEA. You can find them through IFMA Engage. Lori Gilmer actually will eventually be our next president of the whole IFMA enchilada. She's done talks on this. Kit Tuvison did one that I think is in the archives. If you go onto the IFMA Learning Knowledge Library, I think there's a bunch of stuff in the knowledge library that you should have access to as a member. But Kit Tuvison's was called Dancing with the Stars. See if that one's in there. If not, I might be able to dig that up from my archives for you. So if you want to, again, it's Wayne W at DFS Green, David Fred Sam Green.com. And I'll send you that if I can dig it up. But go to the knowledge library and just type in C-suite, and you should get some content back.
Got a couple that came through while you were talking. So the first question is ASP costs versus CSP contracts for HVAC contracts. Which have you found is better?
So I will always tell you that if you have the engine to manage it this way, is I like performance-based contracts better for anything that you do, where the vendor has skin in the game, where they're part of the process, as opposed to. But then here's the problem. We can everything we talk about is like pulling a sweater thread, right? And the whole thing can unravel. If you don't have a subject matter expert and your RFP process isn't set up to procure a subject matter expert, it doesn't necessarily matter, because anybody can do a little bit of smoke and mirrors to get in or set a contract up some way or another, but are they actually going to still be a subject matter expert regardless of the type of contract you set up? So there's a root cause we have to get down to before we even decide to set it. That's the thinking, is if I set the contract up this way versus this way, things will be better. Will they? That's not the root cause. The root cause is below that, which is who is the person performing or the organization performing that work, and are they subject matter experts? Because it doesn't necessarily matter what structure we have, but on the whole, under the big umbrella of performance-based contracts, I tend to like those better, but they only work optimally with an SME. I know it's kind of maybe not the answer you wanted, but that's kind of the way I see it.
Okay. So the next question is, what is the best training / certification would you recommend?
It depends. So I definitely, if you're very new to facilities, or you've brought in young FMs or coordinators who are very new to facilities, I would put them through the EOFM at IFMA, Essentials of Facility Management. You can do that online. It's very inexpensive. I think it's $510 for all the modules. I could be wrong on that. Don't hold me to that, but I think that's what it is. And that's what I would do. If you're next level up from that, if you know what a tiller is, perhaps, then maybe you go take your FMP. And the FMP is a bit more expensive, but a lot of chapters have scholarships. It's something that you can do completely online. And then once you've been a facility manager for a number of years, then you can get your CFM. I believe it's 9 years before you can sit for your CFM. So the EOFM and the FMP are really good. I know there's other designations, outside of IFMA, but really the IFMA certifications are the gold standard in the facility management industry. So I would look at those two.
So just to clarify, just to add to what you said, so the CFM, there are 2 qualifications. If you do not have a degree in an FM related field, then you are required to have 5 years experience with
Okay.
any level of education, or 10 years without any degree. something
Got
like
it.
that. I apologize if I'm misquoting that, but yes, there are qualifications for that. And the essentials is, I second you on that, for people who are new to the field and would like to learn about the competencies and just the back end, and get to know what an FM actually is and what they do. So yes, I agree with that.
And then there's SFP as well, which is up here.
FS, FMP,
SFP.
SFP, yes.
Right. So if you have a bent towards sustainability, and that's something that would be of value to you or your organization, you don't have to have the same credentials as a CFM to take the SFP. It's just those core competencies, but with a focus on sustainability.
hmm And just to also add, you're not, our credentials are not, they don't go hand in hand. You don't have to have one in order to get the other. There's not a certain order that you have to obtain them in. It's really up to you. Okay. And the next question is, can you provide an example of an 11 by 17 sheet?
Yes,
Thanks,
I can.
Gary.
Yes, I can. So I've got one that I've redacted, that I can send out. So if you want to email me directly on that, I can send that to you. Yeah, so I'll do that, and it'll be redacted of any other client information. But basically, it's a dashboard with red, yellow, and green dots, and then anywhere we're behind on, it's, depending on how far behind, it's yellow or red, and those are the things that we want to talk about. And a lot of times it's not because the vendor's running behind on something, it's they're waiting on your department maybe for something, so it helps you to action. But yeah, so again, Wayne W at dfsgreen.com.
Any other questions? Looks like that was our last question, Wayne. Thank you again for your time. It was always a pleasure working with you, and I look forward to working with you again soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Hi, thank you, everyone. Lori, it's Kim.